The autumn chill crept through my cardigan as I stood frozen on the sidewalk across from Emily's house. My breath caught in my throat when I spotted Daniel's sleek black Audi parked in the driveway next to Victoria's white Mercedes. Strange. My son and his wife rarely visited my daughter without a specific occasion, and Emily hadn't mentioned anything about a family gathering when we spoke yesterday. I'd only intended to drop off the quilt I'd finished for my granddaughter Sophie's 16th birthday next week, a surprise Emily and I had planned together. But now, seeing those cars, I hesitated. There was something secretive about this unannounced gathering that made my stomach knot. At 67, I'd learned to trust my instincts. 43 years as a high school principal had given me a sixth sense about trouble brewing. And right now, those instincts were screaming. I crossed the street slowly, the gift bag with Sophie's carefully folded quilt swinging from my wrist. As I approached the side of the house, voices drifted through the partially open dining room window. My son's voice, unusually tense, made me pause. "Emily, you need to understand. Mom can't manage on her own anymore." I froze mid-step. Were they talking about me? "Daniel, that's ridiculous." Emily's voice was sharp with irritation. "Mom is perfectly capable. You don't see her every day," Victoria cut in, her voice carrying that smooth, patronizing tone she reserved for discussions about my advanced age. "She's becoming forgetful. Last week she couldn't remember where she parked at the mall. Daniel had to help her find her car." My cheeks burned. Yes, I'd called Daniel when I couldn't locate my car after a long day of shopping. The parking garage had been undergoing renovations, and they'd closed the section where I normally parked. It could have happened to anyone. "That's hardly evidence of mental decline," Emily responded, echoing my thoughts. "Mom runs circles around most people half her age." "It's not just that." Daniel's voice lowered, but I could still hear him clearly. "She's making poor financial decisions. Did you know she donated $10,000 to that community center renovation project?" $10,000, Emily. My blood began to simmer. That poor financial decision was my money, money I'd earned over decades of work, saved carefully, and chosen to invest in a community space that would serve underprivileged children. A project I'd helped develop during my years in education administration. "So what?" Emily sounded exasperated. "Mom's always supported education initiatives, and it's her money." "That's the problem," Victoria said softly. "She's not thinking clearly about her future. What if she needs assisted living? What if there are medical expenses? She's giving away money that she might need, that we might need to support her." I clutched the gift bag tighter, my knuckles whitening. "We might need." The words echoed in my head. "Look," Daniel continued, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he'd developed as a financial advisor. "Victoria and I have been talking with a lawyer. We think it's time to consider having Mom declared incompetent to manage her financial affairs." The world tilted beneath my feet. Incompetent? My own son wanted to declare me incompetent? If you've ever had your trust betrayed by someone you love deeply, you know the physical pain it causes, like a knife between the ribs that twists with each breath. Have you ever stood alone, hearing someone plot against you while your whole world shatters? What would you do in that moment? "You're not being realistic," Victoria insisted. "Margaret is showing clear signs of decline, the forgetfulness, the impulsive spending. Last month, she booked that cruise to Alaska without telling anyone." I nearly laughed out loud at that one. My Alaskan cruise, a trip I'd dreamed of taking for years and had finally booked after careful research and budgeting, was now evidence of my mental decline? "So she took a vacation," Emily said flatly. "Since when is that a sign of dementia?" "It's the pattern," Daniel explained, his voice dropping to that gentle, concerned tone that I now recognized as pure manipulation. "We've been documenting everything. The lawyer thinks we have a solid case to petition for guardianship." Guardianship. The word hit me like a physical blow. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father abandoned us when he was 4, the child I'd put through college with my savings, the man whose first house down payment had come from my retirement fund, wanted to take control of my life. "This is insane," Emily snapped. "I won't support this. Mom is perfectly capable." "We don't need your support," Victoria cut in coolly. "We have power of attorney." My heart nearly stopped. Power of attorney? I'd never given Daniel power of attorney. Never. What are you talking about? Emily demanded. Mom signed it last Christmas when she was staying with us, Daniel said. She probably doesn't even remember doing it. A memory surfaced, Daniel asking me to sign some papers for a surprise he was planning for Victoria. Just routine stuff, Mom, he'd said. Don't worry about the details. I'd been distracted, helping Sophie with a college application essay in the next room. I'd trusted my son and signed without reading carefully. Fool. I'd been a complete fool. I don't believe you, Emily was saying. Mom would never— It doesn't matter what you believe, Victoria replied. We have the documentation, and once we have guardianship, we can ensure Margaret's assets are properly managed. You mean your inheritance is properly managed? Emily shot back. That's unfair, Daniel protested, but his voice lacked conviction. We just want what's best for Mom. What's best for Mom, or what's best for you? Emily's voice had that steel edge I recognized from my own confrontations with difficult school board members. My daughter had inherited my backbone. Have you even looked at her accounts? Do you know what she has? A short silence fell, and I could almost see the guilty expressions on their faces. We've done some preliminary research, Victoria finally admitted. Margaret has considerable assets. The house is paid off, she has her pension, and there are significant investment accounts. Combined, it's over $2 million. My stomach churned. They'd been investigating my finances? How? When? And let me guess, Emily said coldly. Once you have guardianship, you'll sell her house, move her into some facility, and manage her money right into your own accounts. That's not fair, Daniel protested, but his voice was weak. What's not fair is plotting to steal from your own mother, Emily fired back. Get out of my house, now. You're making a mistake, Victoria warned. If you oppose us, you'll get nothing when the time comes. I don't want anything, Emily shouted. I want my mother to live her life with dignity and respect, something you two apparently know nothing about. I heard chairs scraping and footsteps moving toward the front door. Quickly, I retreated behind the large oak tree at the edge of the yard, my heart pounding wildly as Daniel and Victoria emerged from the house. Victoria's face was flushed with anger, while Daniel looked troubled, his brow furrowed in that way it had been since childhood when he was caught doing something wrong. She'll come around, Victoria murmured as they walked to their cars. She has to understand this is for Margaret's own good. Maybe we should wait, Daniel suggested, his voice uncertain. Mom seems fine most of the time. We can't wait, Victoria hissed. The longer we delay, the more money she might give away or spend. Remember, we agreed. The beach house won't happen unless we secure this money. Your mother's sitting on a fortune while we're scraping by. Scraping by? In their 5-bedroom house with luxury cars and annual European vacations? My son earned 6 figures at his investment firm, and Victoria's interior design business catered to wealthy clients in Boston. They were hardly destitute. I know, Daniel muttered. Let's just get through the hearing next month. Judge Williams is sympathetic to these cases. He'll see it our way. They climbed into their separate cars and drove away, leaving me trembling behind the tree, the gift bag now crushed against my chest. Next month. They had planned a hearing next month to declare me incompetent, to take everything I'd worked for, everything I'd saved, everything I'd built. My home, my independence, my dignity. I waited until they were out of sight before approaching Emily's front door on unsteady legs. When I rang the doorbell, I fought to compose my features, to hide the storm raging inside me. Emily opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. Mom, what are you doing here? I brought Sophie's quilt, I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. Is this a bad time? Emily's face crumpled, and I knew immediately that she was struggling with whether to tell me about the conversation she'd just had. My brave, honest daughter, the one who defended me while her brother plotted my financial demise. Come in, she said, stepping aside. We need to talk. I followed her into the living room, setting the gift bag on the coffee table. Emily paced nervously, running her hands through her auburn hair, my hair color before it had turned silver. Mom, there's something I need to tell you, she began hesitantly. Daniel and Victoria were just here, and— I know, I interrupted softly. I overheard everything. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. Don't be sorry. You defended me beautifully. I can't believe they would do this, she whispered, sinking onto the sofa beside me. Their own mother. I can, I said, surprising myself with the calm acceptance in my voice. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by something else, something cold and determined. Money does strange things to people. Even family. What are you going to do? Emily asked. I considered the question carefully. My son and his wife had been planning this for months, maybe longer. They'd tricked me into signing a power of attorney. They'd been documenting my every move, twisting normal actions into evidence of mental decline. They'd already scheduled a hearing. They thought they were dealing with a forgetful old woman who would be easily manipulated and controlled. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. First, I said, standing up straighter, I'm going to call Richard Coleman. Your old friend from the school board? The attorney? I nodded. Richard specializes in elder law now, and he owes me a favor or two. And then? Emily asked. A smile spread across my face. Not the warm, maternal smile I usually wore, but something sharper, more dangerous. The smile I'd used when facing down budget cuts and unruly staff members. The smile that had earned me the nickname Iron Margaret during my tenure as principal. And then, my dear, I said, I'm going to teach your brother a lesson he'll never forget. Emily's expression shifted from concern to something like admiration. They have no idea what they're in for, do they? No, I agreed, retrieving my phone from my purse. They don't. As I dialed Richard's number, a strange calm settled over me. Daniel and Victoria thought they were so clever, so careful in their planning. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me, and that would be their undoing. Richard, it's Margaret Ellison, I said when he answered. I need your help with something urgent. How soon can we meet? As I arranged to meet Richard at his office the following morning, I felt a fierce clarity I hadn't experienced in years. My son thought I was losing my mental faculties? Well, he was about to discover just how sharp my mind truly was. The game was on, and I didn't intend to lose. I slept poorly that night, my mind racing with fragments of the conversation I'd overheard. Daniel's betrayal cut deeper than any pain I'd experienced since his father walked out 39 years ago. But unlike then, I wouldn't allow myself to collapse into grief. This time, I had resources, experience, and a fire in my belly that burned away any trace of self-pity. By morning, I'd formulated the beginnings of a plan. After a strong cup of black coffee, the same way I'd started every day of my working life, I dressed with particular care. Charcoal gray pantsuit, light blue blouse, pearl earrings, minimal makeup, professional, authoritative, not a confused old woman who couldn't manage her affairs. Richard Coleman's law office occupied the top floor of a historic building in downtown Portsmouth. We'd served together on the school board for 12 years before he returned to private practice specializing in elder law. He greeted me with a warm hug when his assistant showed me in. Margaret, it's been too long, he said, guiding me to a comfortable chair across from his desk. At 72, Richard still maintained the imposing presence that had made him such an effective advocate in the courtroom. Silver hair, keen blue eyes, straight-backed posture. Your call sounded urgent. What can I do for you? I took a deep breath and laid out everything. Daniel and Victoria's plot, the power of attorney I'd unwittingly signed, the upcoming guardianship hearing. Richard's expression darkened as I spoke. By the time I finished, his jaw was clenched in anger. This is elder abuse, plain and simple, he said, scribbling notes on a legal pad. Financial exploitation by family members is more common than people realize, but that doesn't make it any less despicable. He looked up. Do you have a copy of this power of attorney? I shook my head. I didn't even know it existed until yesterday. First order of business then, he said, reaching for his phone. We'll demand a copy immediately. If it exists, it was obtained through fraud and misrepresentation. We'll have it invalidated. While Richard spoke with his assistant about preparing the necessary documents, I stared out his office window at the harbor below. Ships coming and going, just as they had for centuries. There was something reassuring about that constancy. The world kept turning, despite personal betrayals. Richard hung up and turned back to me. Now, about this guardianship petition. When exactly is the hearing? October 21st, I said. That's what Daniel mentioned. Judge Williams, apparently. Richard's eyebrows shot up. Raymond Williams? That's interesting. You know him? We went to law school together, Richard said with a slight smile. He's actually a stickler for proper procedure and evidence. If Daniel and Victoria think he'll rubber stamp their petition based on flimsy evidence, they're sadly mistaken. Hope flickered in my chest. So, we have a chance? More than a chance, Margaret. But we need to be strategic. Richard leaned forward. They've been building their case quietly, documenting what they perceive as evidence of your decline. We need to counter that with overwhelming evidence of your competence. How do we do that? Medical evaluation, for starters. I'll arrange for you to be assessed by Dr. Eleanor Winslow. She's the best geriatric specialist in the state. Her evaluation will carry significant weight. I nodded, making mental notes. What else? Financial review. We'll need a comprehensive audit of your accounts showing sound management. Can you gather your financial statements for the past 2 years? Of course, I said. I'd always kept meticulous records, a habit from my years managing school budgets. Good. Richard made another note. And we'll need to document your daily activities. Journal entries, receipts, calendar appointments, anything that demonstrates you're living an active, engaged life with full decision-making capacity. As Richard outlined our defense strategy, a troubling thought occurred to me. Richard, something else is bothering me. Victoria mentioned they'd been researching my finances. How would they have access to that information? Richard frowned. That's concerning. Have you noticed any unusual activity? Missing statements? Unfamiliar transactions? I thought carefully. Not specifically, but I admit I haven't been monitoring everything closely since retirement. I set up automatic payments for most bills. Let's check everything, Richard said decisively. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, credit reports. If they've accessed your financial information without authorization, that's another serious offense we can use against them. By the time I left Richard's office 2 hours later, we had a comprehensive battle plan. I felt energized in a way I hadn't in years, the same rush of purpose I'd experienced when tackling difficult challenges as a principal. My first stop was the bank. I'd been using Portsmouth Community Bank for 30 years and knew most of the staff by name. Martha Williams, the branch manager, greeted me warmly and showed me to her private office when I explained I needed to review my accounts. Margaret, it's lovely to see you, she said. What can I help you with today? I need a complete record of all activity on my accounts for the past year, I explained. And I'd like to know if anyone else has requested information about my accounts. Martha's friendly expression flickered briefly. Let me check that for you. As she typed on her computer, I noticed a framed photograph on her desk. A young woman in a graduation cap and gown. Is that your daughter? I asked. Martha beamed. Yes, that's Jessica. She just graduated from UNH with a degree in environmental science. The scholarship from the Education Foundation you started made it possible. I smiled, remembering the foundation I'd established with my retirement bonus to support first-generation college students. Another frivolous expenditure Daniel would probably use against me. Martha's typing stopped, and she frowned at her screen. That's odd. There have been several information requests on your accounts in the past few months. My heart quickened. From whom? Most recently from Daniel Ellison. He provided your power of attorney documentation. So he had been using that. Fraudulent document already. And did you provide him with information? Yes, as required with a valid POA. Martha looked uncomfortable. We sent statements for all your accounts. Was that not authorized? I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, I said carefully. I need to revoke that power of attorney immediately. Martha's eyes widened slightly, but her professional demeanor remained intact. Of course, I'll prepare the paperwork right away. By the time I left the bank, I had revoked Daniel's access to my accounts, changed all my passwords, placed a freeze on my credit, and obtained complete records of my finances for the past 2 years. The statements confirmed what Victoria had said. Between my pension, investments, and the value of my mortgage-free home, my net worth was just over $2 million. No fortune by today's standards, but certainly enough to fund Daniel and Victoria's dream beach house. My next stop was unexpected. On impulse, I drove to the small electronics store where my grandson-in-law worked. Tyler, Emily's son-in-law, was a computer security specialist who had helped me set up my home network last year. Mrs. Ellison, He greeted me warmly when I found him in the computer section. "What brings you in today?" "I need some technical assistance," I said. "And absolute discretion." Tyler's expression grew serious. "Of course. What's going on?" I gave him a condensed version of the situation. His face darkened as I explained. "That's unbelievable," he said when I finished. "How can I help?" "I need to know if anyone has accessed my computer or accounts without my knowledge, and I need to gather evidence." Tyler thought for a moment. "I can check your computer for any remote access software and secure it going forward. As for gathering evidence," he lowered his voice, "there are legal ways to record conversations in New Hampshire, as long as one party consents. That would be you." "You mean like wearing a wire?" I asked, surprised. Tyler smiled. "Much less conspicuous than that. There are recording devices disguised as everyday objects. Pens, watches, even jewelry." An hour later, I left the store with a secured smartphone, a digital voice recorder disguised as a pen, and a small camera hidden in what appeared to be an ordinary brooch. Tyler had also scheduled a time to come check my home computer for any spyware or unauthorized access. The final stop of my day was at Dr. Eleanor Winslow's office. Richard had called ahead, explaining the urgency of my situation, and she had agreed to see me between scheduled patients. Dr. Winslow was a formidable woman around my age, with short gray hair and penetrating hazel eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. She listened intently as I explained my situation. "Unfortunately, what you're describing is something I see with increasing frequency," she said. "Adult children using guardianship as a means to control their parents' assets." She shook her head in disgust. "I'll conduct a thorough cognitive and functional assessment today, and we can schedule follow-up tests as needed." The evaluation was extensive. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, questions about current events, assessments of my ability to manage medications and finances. By the end, Dr. Winslow was smiling. "Mrs. Ellison, you have the cognitive function of someone 20 years younger," she said, making notes in my file. "There is absolutely no medical justification for a guardianship." Relief washed over me. "You'll put that in writing?" "I'll prepare a comprehensive report and be prepared to testify if necessary," she assured me. "And I'll add this to your regular medical records as well, so there's documentation of your capacity from your routine care." I drove home feeling exhausted, but satisfied with the day's progress. As I turned onto my street, I noticed a familiar car parked near my house, Daniel's Audi. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was actually an opportunity. Activating the recording pen in my purse, I parked in the driveway and walked toward the house with measured steps. Daniel was sitting on my front porch, his expression a practiced mask of concern. "Mom," he said, standing as I approached, "I've been worried about you. You haven't been answering your phone." "I've been out all day," I replied coolly, unlocking the front door. "Errands to run, people to see." "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you," he said, following me inside without waiting for an invitation. "Victoria and I are concerned that you're overextending yourself. You should be relaxing, enjoying retirement." I set my purse down carefully, ensuring the recorder remained activated. "I am enjoying retirement, Daniel. On my terms." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it momentarily caught me off guard. "Mom, we need to talk about your finances." "What about them?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral as I moved to the kitchen to put on a kettle for tea. "Act normal," I reminded myself. "Don't let him suspect you know. Victoria and I have been looking at your accounts." "My accounts?" I interrupted, allowing just a hint of surprise to color my tone. "Why would you be looking at my private financial information?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "As your power of attorney, I have a responsibility to make sure everything's in order." "Power of attorney?" I echoed, turning to face him with what I hoped was a convincingly puzzled expression. "When did I give you power of attorney?" "Last Christmas, Mom. Don't you remember? You signed the papers when you were staying with us." I frowned, as if trying to recall. "I remember signing something for Victoria's surprise. You said it was routine paperwork." A flash of guilt crossed Daniel's face before he masked it. "It was the power of attorney, Mom, for your protection." "My protection," I repeated flatly. "And what exactly are you protecting me from, Daniel?" "Yourself, mostly," he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that made my blood simmer. You've been making some concerning financial decisions lately. The community center donation, that Alaskan cruise, the new car. My money, I said quietly. Earned over 43 years of work. Saved carefully. Invested wisely. Yes, but… Tell me, Daniel, I interrupted, pouring hot water into a teacup with deliberate precision. When did my financial decisions become your business? Mom, we're just trying to help, he insisted. That concerned son act firmly in place. Victoria and I have been talking with some experts about the best way to protect your assets. For me or for you? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Have you ever had to pretend you didn't know someone was betraying you, smiling in their face while they lied to yours? The restraint it takes, the control needed to keep your voice steady and your hands from shaking, it's excruciating. But sometimes that mask of ignorance is your only weapon. Would you have the strength to wear it? Daniel's expression hardened slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I backtracked, not ready to reveal my hand just yet. Nothing. I'm just not sure why my spending habits are suddenly a concern. He relaxed fractionally. We just want what's best for you, Mom. Which reminds me, there's a doctor's appointment I'd like you to come to next week. Dr. Lawrence is excellent with seniors, and he can do a complete evaluation. Dr. Lawrence, undoubtedly a physician sympathetic to their cause, who would find evidence of cognitive decline regardless of reality. I just had my annual physical with Dr. Brennan last month, I said mildly. Clean bill of health, including the cognitive assessment she always includes. Daniel looked surprised. Cognitive assessment? Standard for patients over 65, I explained, sipping my tea. Dr. Brennan is very thorough. In fact, I scored in the top percentile for my age group. A slight exaggeration, but close enough to the truth. Still, a second opinion wouldn't hurt, Daniel pressed. Dr. Lawrence specializes in geriatric care. So does Dr. Eleanor Winslow, I countered. I just saw her today, actually. Daniel's expression froze. You saw a geriatric specialist today? Why? I shrugged. Richard Coleman recommended her. He thought it would be good to have a baseline cognitive assessment on file. Richard Coleman? Daniel's voice rose slightly. Why are you talking? To him? We had lunch yesterday, I lied smoothly. Just catching up. He mentioned Dr. Winslow's excellent reputation. Daniel's phone buzzed, and he checked it quickly, his frown deepening. I need to go, he said abruptly. We'll continue this conversation later. Of course, dear, I said, walking him to the door. Give Victoria my love. As soon as his car pulled away, I retrieved the recording pen and played back our conversation. Clear as day, I had Daniel admitting he'd tricked me into signing the power of attorney, expressing concern about my concerning financial decisions, and pushing for an evaluation with his chosen doctor. I smiled grimly as I sent the audio file to the secure email address Tyler had set up for me. Evidence gathered. Day 1. The battle had begun, and I was already 2 steps ahead. The next 2 weeks became a carefully orchestrated campaign. Each morning, I reviewed my battle plan over coffee, checking off completed tasks and adding new strategies as they emerged. The organizational skills I'd honed over decades in education administration served me well as I built my case methodically, piece by piece. Tyler confirmed my suspicions when he examined my home computer. Someone installed remote monitoring software about 3 months ago, he told me, pointing to lines of code I couldn't begin to understand. It allows access to your emails, documents, even your web browsing history. Daniel, I said grimly. He helped me update my security settings when he visited in July. Tyler nodded. That tracks. I've removed it and installed legitimate security software. I've also set up 2-factor authentication on all your accounts. He handed me a small device. This is a hardware key. Without it, no one can access your accounts, even with your password. With my digital life secured, I turned my attention to financial documentation. Martha from the bank had provided records showing Daniel had accessed my accounts 17 times in the past 4 months. The credit report I obtained revealed 2 credit inquiries initiated by him as well. Richard assured me these unauthorized actions would significantly damage Daniel's case. We're building a counter-narrative, Richard explained during our second meeting. They want to paint you as a confused, elderly woman making poor decisions, will show you as the victim of systematic financial exploitation by your own son. The evidence continued to mount. My investment broker confirmed Daniel had requested information about my portfolio, again using the fraudulent power of attorney. Dr. Winslow's comprehensive cognitive assessment declared me exceptionally mentally acute with no signs of impairment whatsoever. I even obtained a written statement from the community center director detailing my involved role in the renovation project, hardly the impulsive donation of a confused elderly woman. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade of normalcy whenever I interacted with Daniel. He called every other day, ostensibly to check on me, but I recognized these conversations for what they truly were, attempts to document my mental state. Little did he know I was recording every interaction, building my own evidence file. Emily was my rock during this time. She invited me to dinner twice a week, allowing me moments of unguarded honesty where I could express the hurt and rage I carefully concealed from Daniel. Sophie, my sweet granddaughter, sensed something was wrong, but didn't press for details. Instead, she simply stayed close, her quiet presence a balm to my wounded heart. "I don't understand how Uncle Daniel could do this," she said one evening as we worked together in Emily's kitchen. "You've done everything for him." "Money changes people, sweetheart," I replied, the familiar ache in my chest pulsing as I spoke, "and not usually for the better." The week before the hearing, Richard called with unexpected news. "The court clerk is a former student of yours, Margaret, Denise Kingsley. She remembers you from her senior year English literature class in 1998. I smiled at the memory. Denise, bright girl, wrote a brilliant analysis of Shakespearean tragic heroes. Well, she happened to mention to me that Judge Williams received a letter from Dr. Lawrence regarding your case. A professional assessment, apparently." My stomach tightened. "Daniel's doctor." "Yes. And she also mentioned that Daniel and his attorney had a private meeting with the judge yesterday." "Is that legal?" I asked, alarmed. "It's called an ex parte communication. And no, it's not appropriate in this situation," Richard said grimly. "But it gives us valuable information. They're working behind the scenes, which suggests they're worried about their case. And now we know who their medical expert is. Can we get a copy of this assessment?" "Already requested," Richard said. "But I'm not optimistic they'll share it before the hearing. They're banking on surprise." That night, I sat in my study surrounded by documents, financial statements, medical evaluations, recorded conversations, bank records. So much evidence of Daniel's betrayal, it made my chest ache. Outside, a storm was building, wind rattling the windows as rain began to pelt against the glass. The weather matched my turbulent emotions. My phone chimed with a text message from Emily. "Victoria just called, trying to convince me again to support their petition. Said it would be better for everyone if I didn't oppose them." I typed back, "What did you say?" Her response came quickly. I told her I'd see her in court. Pride and gratitude washed over me. Whatever happened, I wouldn't face this battle alone. The day before the hearing, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang just after lunch, and I opened it to find Victoria standing on my porch, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. "Margaret," she said with a practiced smile. "May I come in?" Every instinct screamed to slam the door in her face, but I recognized an opportunity when I saw one. I activated the recording pen in my pocket before stepping aside. "Of course." Victoria moved into my living room with the confidence of someone who already considered the space her own. I noticed her eyes sweeping over my furniture, artwork, and bookshelves, mentally cataloging assets, no doubt. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, maintaining the pretense of normal civility. "No, thank you. This won't take long." She settled onto my sofa, arranging herself elegantly. "I wanted to speak with you privately before tomorrow's hearing." "I see," I said, sitting across from her. "What about?" "Margaret, I know you must be confused about what's happening." Her voice took on that condescending tone I'd grown to despise. "Daniel and I are only trying to help you." "By declaring me incompetent?" I asked mildly. Victoria sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "That's such a harsh term. We're simply ensuring you have the support you need as you age. Making sure your finances are protected." "From whom?" "From poor decisions," she said smoothly. "From people who might take advantage of you." The irony was almost laughable. Like who? Well, for instance, this community center donation. $10,000 is a significant sum. It's a cause I believe in, I replied. I've supported education initiatives my entire career. Of course, but there are more efficient ways to make charitable contributions. Tax considerations, estate planning, implications. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. Things you shouldn't have to worry about at your age. My age, I repeated. I'm 67, Victoria, not 97. And we want to ensure you enjoy many more healthy years, she countered, without financial stress. I studied her perfect facade, wondering if she actually believed her own lies or if she was simply an exceptional performer. What exactly are you proposing? Victoria leaned forward, a conspiratorial smile forming on her lips. I've come to offer a compromise. If you agree not to contest the guardianship petition tomorrow, we'll ensure you can stay in your home. You'll receive a generous monthly allowance, and we won't make any major changes without consulting you. How generous of you, I said, fighting to keep the sarcasm from my voice. And if I refuse? Her smile tightened. Then things could become unpleasant. A contested hearing, your competency publicly questioned. It would be embarrassing for everyone, especially you. Former principal of Portsmouth High, reduced to defending her mental capacity in open court. She shook her head sadly. I'm trying to spare you that indignity, Margaret. Hot anger surged through me, but I channeled it into a calm, measured response. Let me make sure I understand. You and Daniel want control of my assets, my house, my investments, my pension, but you'll allow me to continue living in my own home and receive an allowance from my own money as long as I don't fight back? Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly at my directness. That's a rather uncharitable interpretation. But an accurate one? She stood abruptly. I can see you're not in a reasonable frame of mind today. Perhaps you should discuss this with Daniel. He might be able to explain it in terms you can better understand. I rose as well, holding her gaze steadily. I understand perfectly, Victoria. More than you realize. Something in my tone must have registered because a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Just think about what I've said. For everyone's sake. Oh, I will, I assured her, walking her to the door. I'll be thinking about it all the way to the courthouse tomorrow. As soon as she left, I called Richard and played him the recording of our conversation. His response was immediate and fierce. This is attempted coercion, he said, and it proves they're after your assets, not your welfare. We'll add this to our evidence. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cool, a perfect October day in New Hampshire. The maple trees lining my street blazed with red and gold. A dramatic backdrop as I emerged from my house, dressed in a navy blue suit I'd worn to countless school board meetings and parent conferences. Battle armor, of a sort. Emily arrived to drive me to the courthouse, her expression a mix of concern and determination. Ready for this? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, clutching my leather portfolio containing copies of all our evidence. Richard had the originals, but I'd insisted on bringing my own set, old habits from my administrative days. We arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early to find Richard waiting on the steps. Good morning, ladies, he greeted us. We've had an interesting development. Daniel's attorney requested a private conference with Judge Williams and me before the hearing. Is that good or bad? Emily asked. Richard smiled. Generally, when the opposing counsel suddenly wants a private meeting, it means they're worried. I think they've realized this isn't going to be the easy victory they anticipated. Inside the courthouse, we were directed to a small conference room where Daniel, Victoria, and their attorney, a sleek young man in an expensive suit, were already seated. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes when I entered, but Victoria gave me a cold, assessing stare. Judge Williams arrived moments later, a tall, distinguished man with salt and pepper hair and penetrating gray eyes. I recognized him from community events over the years, though we'd never spoken directly. Good morning, he said briskly. I understand there's a guardianship petition before me today, but counsel has requested this preliminary conference. Mr. Harrington, since you called for this meeting, please proceed. Daniel's attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, we've received some concerning information about potential evidence. Mrs. Ellison's counsel intends to present today, We believe much of it was obtained through deceptive means and should be excluded. Richard straightened beside me. That's a serious allegation, counselor. Perhaps you could be more specific? We understand Mrs. Ellison has been recording private conversations without proper notification to all parties, Mr. Harrington said, which is potentially illegal in this jurisdiction. New Hampshire is a one-party consent state, Richard countered, smoothly. As Mrs. Ellison's counsel, I can assure you all recordings were obtained legally, with one party's consent, hers. Mr. Harrington looked briefly discomfited before pressing on. Nevertheless, Your Honor, we believe these recordings were made with the specific intent to entrap our clients into making statements that could be misconstrued. Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. Misconstrued? Either statements were made or they weren't, counselor. Context is important, Your Honor, Mr. Harrington insisted. The petitioners were acting out of genuine concern for Mrs. Ellison's welfare. Richard opened his briefcase and removed a folder. Perhaps Your Honor would like to review the transcripts of these recordings before making a determination? They provide ample context. Judge Williams accepted the folder, his expression neutral as he began to read. The room fell silent. I watched Daniel shifting uncomfortably in his seat, while Victoria maintained her perfect posture, though her knuckles whitened as she gripped her designer handbag. After several minutes, Judge Williams set down the papers and looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Ellison, did you obtain power of attorney from your mother through misrepresentation? Daniel's face paled. Your Honor, It's a straightforward question, Judge Williams interrupted. Did you or did you not tell your mother she was signing documents for a surprise rather than a power of attorney? Daniel glanced at his attorney, who gave a slight nod. I may have simplified the explanation, he admitted reluctantly. Judge Williams turned to Victoria. And Mrs. Ellison, did you visit the respondent yesterday to offer a compromise if she wouldn't contest these proceedings? Victoria's composure finally cracked. I was trying to reach an amicable solution, she said defensively, to avoid a public spectacle. I see. Judge Williams closed the folder and addressed all of us. Based on what I've reviewed, I have serious concerns about the validity of this petition. Before we proceed to a formal hearing, I'd like to offer the petitioners an opportunity to withdraw their request. Stunned silence filled the room. Daniel and Victoria exchanged panicked glances while their attorney leaned in to whisper urgently to them. I felt a surge of vindication, watching their carefully constructed plan crumble before my eyes. After all their scheming, their manipulation, their betrayal, justice was finally within reach. It was, without question, the most satisfying moment of my life. Tell me honestly, what gives you more satisfaction? Delivering swift justice to those who've wronged you, or watching them squirm as they realize they've been outmaneuvered? There's a unique pleasure in seeing the moment betrayers understand they've failed, isn't there? Judge Williams turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Mrs. Ellison, these proceedings can be extremely stressful. We can adjourn briefly if you'd like a moment to collect yourself. Thank you, Your Honor, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. But I'd prefer to continue. I've been preparing for this day, and I'm ready to proceed, whether my son withdraws his petition or not. The judge nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Very well. Mr. Harrington, what is your client's decision? After another hurried consultation, the attorney straightened his tie and addressed the court. Your Honor, in light of certain new information, my clients would like to request a continuance to reassess their petition. Denied, Judge Williams said flatly. Either withdraw the petition now, or we'll proceed to a full hearing where all evidence, including these recordings, will be admissible. Daniel finally looked at me directly, his expression a mixture of shame and desperation. In that moment, I saw not the conniving adult who had betrayed me, but glimpses of the little boy I'd raised, the child who would knock over a lamp, and then deny responsibility despite the evidence in plain sight. We withdraw, he said quietly, his voice barely audible in the silent room. Judge Williams nodded. Very well. The petition for guardianship is dismissed. Mrs. Ellison, you are free to go. He paused, then added, and for the record, I see no evidence whatsoever of diminished capacity, quite the contrary. As we rose to leave, Richard leaned close to Daniel's attorney. We'll be filing a separate action regarding the fraudulently obtained power of attorney and unauthorized access to Mrs. Ellison's financial records. I suggest you advise your clients to prepare accordingly." Outside the courthouse, standing in the brilliant autumn sunshine, Emily hugged me tightly. "You did it, Mom. You beat them." "We did it," I corrected her, including Richard in my grateful smile. "I couldn't have done this alone." Richard clasped my hand warmly. "You were magnificent, Margaret. But this isn't quite finished. We still need to invalidate that power of attorney and address the financial intrusions." "And we will," I assured him. "But first, I think I need to sit down for a minute. It's been quite a morning." As we descended the courthouse steps, I spotted Daniel and Victoria emerging from a side door, their faces tight with anger and humiliation. When they saw us, Daniel hesitated, as if considering approaching, but Victoria pulled him toward their car. "This isn't over," I heard her hiss. I watched them drive away, feeling not triumph, but a profound sadness. My relationship with my son was irreparably damaged. No legal victory could heal that wound. But I had protected myself. I had stood my ground. I had refused to be diminished or controlled. And in doing so, I had reclaimed not just my assets, but my dignity. The days following the courthouse victory passed in a blur of legal activities. Richard worked tirelessly to file motions invalidating the fraudulent power of attorney, while I focused on securing my financial accounts and digital presence. Tyler installed additional security measures on my home network and computer, ensuring Daniel could never again spy on my activities or access my information without permission. "I've also set up alerts that will notify you if anyone attempts to access your accounts," he explained as he worked. "And I've documented all evidence of the previous intrusions for Richard's case." The betrayal still cut deep, but I channeled my hurt into productive action rather than allowing it to consume me. There would be time for grief later. For now, I needed to ensure my independence was completely restored and protected. A week after the hearing, Richard called with an update. "The court has officially revoked the power of attorney," he reported, "and we've filed a civil suit against Daniel for financial exploitation. The bank records showing his unauthorized access have been submitted as evidence." "What happens next?" I asked, gazing out my kitchen window at the maple tree in my backyard, its leaves now a brilliant crimson. "The civil case will take time," Richard cautioned. "But given the evidence, I'm confident we'll prevail. In the meantime, have you given any thought to what we discussed about updating your will?" I had, in fact, been thinking about it constantly. "Yes, I'd like to proceed with that as soon as possible." 2 days later, I sat in Richard's office, finalizing my new estate plan. The changes were significant and necessary. "You're sure about this?" Richard asked as I reviewed the documents. "Completely disinheriting Daniel is a major step." "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, my voice steady. "He plotted to take everything from me while I was still alive. Why would I give it to him after I'm gone?" Richard nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And the new beneficiaries?" "Emily and Sophie," I confirmed. "Equal shares, with provisions for Sophie's education fully funded first." I paused, considering. "And I'd like to establish a trust for the community center's educational programs as well. 10% of my estate." Richard smiled. "A fitting response to their complaints about your frivolous donation." "Exactly," I agreed. "Let my legacy support education, just as my life's work did." As I signed the new will and trust documents, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Whatever happened from this point forward, my wishes would be honored. Daniel and Victoria couldn't touch what I'd worked so hard to build. The civil case proceeded slowly, as Richard had warned. Daniel hired a new attorney, more experienced and less aggressive than the young man who had represented him at the guardianship hearing. This lawyer reached out to Richard within weeks, seeking a settlement. "They're offering to drop all claims regarding your competency and pay restitution for any financial damages if you'll agree to drop the civil suit," Richard explained during our next meeting. "And what do you advise?" I asked. Richard considered carefully. "Legally, we have a strong case, and we could potentially be awarded significant damages if we proceed to trial. However, trials are unpredictable, expensive, and emotionally draining. A settlement guarantees an outcome and puts this behind you more quickly." I thought about the prospect of facing Daniel in court again, of having our family's private matters further exposed in public proceedings. What would the settlement terms include? Full restitution for any expenses you incurred defending against the guardianship petition. A legally binding agreement that Daniel will never again attempt to challenge your competency or interfere with your finances. And an admission of wrongdoing. The admission is essential, I said firmly. I want it in writing that he obtained the power of attorney through deception and accessed my accounts without proper authorization. Richard nodded. I'll make that clear in our counteroffer. Negotiations continued for several weeks. Daniel's attorney pushed back on the admission of wrongdoing, but Richard held firm on my behalf. Finally, a compromise was reached. Daniel would acknowledge the improper acquisition of power of attorney and unauthorized access to my accounts, without explicitly admitting fraud or exploitation. It's as close to an admission as we're likely to get without going to trial, Richard advised. And the settlement amount is generous. It covers all your legal expenses plus an additional $50,000 in damages. After careful consideration, I agreed to the terms. Not because I forgave Daniel, but because continuing the legal battle served no purpose beyond prolonging the pain. It was time to close this chapter and move forward. The settlement agreement was signed in early December, bringing formal closure to the legal aspects of Daniel's betrayal. The emotional closure, however, proved more elusive. I hadn't spoken directly to my son since the courthouse confrontation. He had called several times, leaving voicemails that ranged from defensive, "You misunderstood our intentions," to grudgingly apologetic. Things got out of hand. I'd listened to each message, but hadn't returned his calls. What was there to say? Some breaches of trust can't be repaired with words. As Christmas approached, Emily invited me to spend the holiday at her house. "Sophie would love to have you here," she said during one of our regular coffee dates. "And honestly, so would I. It's been a rough few months." "Has Daniel contacted you?" I asked. Emily had been remarkably loyal throughout the ordeal, standing firmly by my side, despite what must have been intense pressure from her brother. She nodded. "He wants to come for Christmas dinner. Says it's time for family healing." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "And how do you feel about that?" "Conflicted," she admitted. "He's still my brother and Sophie's uncle. But what he tried to do to you..." She shook her head. "I told him I needed to talk to you first." I considered my response carefully. The last thing I wanted was to create division between Emily and her brother, despite everything he'd done. "It's your home, Emily. You should decide who to welcome at your table." "But it would be your Christmas too," she pointed out. "I won't make you uncomfortable in my home." "Perhaps we could do separate celebrations this year," I suggested. "You could have Daniel and Victoria over on Christmas Eve, and I could join you for Christmas Day." Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Are you sure? I don't want you to be alone on Christmas Eve." "I won't be," I assured her. "I've been invited to Richard and Janet's annual party." Richard had indeed extended the invitation, which I'd initially declined. Now I would reconsider. Emily looked relieved. "That could work. But Mom, eventually we'll need to figure out how to move forward as a family. Or what's left of it." "I know," I said softly. "But healing takes time. And some wounds cut deeper than others." The week before Christmas, I received an unexpected delivery. A large envelope from Daniel's attorney containing a handwritten letter from my son. For a long moment, I simply held it, uncertain whether to read it or return it unopened. Finally, curiosity won out. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Daniel's familiar, neat handwriting. "Mom, I've started this letter a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. Maybe there aren't any. What I did was inexcusable, and I won't insult you by trying to justify my actions. The truth, the full truth, is that Victoria and I have been experiencing financial difficulties for the past 2 years. Bad investments, excessive spending, mounting debt. The beach house wasn't just a dream, it was an escape plan. We thought if we could liquidate some of your assets, we could solve our problems without facing the consequences of our poor choices. It was wrong, despicable, a betrayal of everything you taught me about integrity and responsibility. I let greed and desperation override my conscience and my love for you. In doing so, I've lost something far more valuable than money. I've lost your trust and respect. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I want you to know that I regret my actions deeply, and I'm taking steps to address the underlying issues. Victoria and I have begun financial counseling. We've sold the vacation property in Vermont and downsized our primary home. We're learning to live within our means, something you modeled so well throughout my childhood that I should have known better. I understand if you need distance. I understand if you never want to see me again. But I hope in time you might be willing to have a conversation. Not to repair what I've broken. I know that may be impossible, but to at least hear directly from me how sorry I am for the pain I've caused. With deepest regrets, Daniel. I read the letter twice, emotions washing over me in waves, anger, hurt, and a reluctant flicker of something that might have been compassion. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first tentative step toward understanding. I set the letter aside without responding. Daniel's apology needed to be considered carefully, not answered impulsively. For now, I would focus on celebrating Christmas with Emily and Sophie, finding joy in the family that had stood by me. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, stars glittering like diamonds in the night sky as I drove to Richard and Janet's home. Their holiday party was elegant but comfortable. About 30 guests gathered in their beautifully decorated Victorian house, with a jazz quartet playing softly in the corner and catering staff circulating with trays of hors d'oeuvres. "Margaret," Janet greeted me warmly. "I'm so glad you changed your mind about coming. Richard tells me you've had quite an autumn." I smiled at her understatement. That's one way to put it. "Well, tonight is about celebration and friendship," she said, linking her arm through mine. "Let me introduce you to some people I think you'll enjoy meeting." The evening proved surprisingly pleasant. I found myself engaged in stimulating conversations about everything from local politics to literature. Dr. Eleanor Winslow was among the guests, and we spent a delightful half-hour discussing our mutual love of mystery novels. I even found myself laughing genuinely for what felt like the first time in months. As I was preparing to leave, Richard drew me aside. "I have some news that might interest you," he said quietly. "It seems Daniel and Victoria have filed for bankruptcy protection." I absorbed this information with a strange lack of surprise. "That explains a lot." Richard nodded. "Financial desperation drives people to desperate actions. It doesn't excuse what they tried to do to you, but it provides context." Daniel mentioned financial difficulties in his letter, I acknowledged. "Though not bankruptcy. Pride," Richard suggested. "It's a powerful force." On the drive home, I found myself reflecting on Daniel's situation. The bankruptcy filing aligned with his letter's claims about financial troubles. Perhaps he had been telling the truth about his motivations, if not about his methods. Christmas Day with Emily and Sophie was everything I needed, warm, loving, and uncomplicated. We exchanged gifts, by the fire, enjoyed a leisurely breakfast, and spent the afternoon playing board games while snow fell gently outside. Sophie was delighted with the additional quilt I'd made for her dorm room, and Emily teared up when she opened the antique locket containing photos of her grandmother and great-grandmother. "Family history," I explained as she examined it. "Passed from mother to daughter for 3 generations now." "It's beautiful," Emily said, fastening it around her neck. "Thank you for preserving these connections." After dinner, as Sophie helped Emily with the dishes, I stepped onto the back porch for a moment of quiet reflection. The night was still, the freshly fallen snow reflecting moonlight in a peaceful glow. I thought about Daniel and Victoria, wondering how they were spending their evening, whether their financial troubles had dampened their holiday celebrations. I wasn't ready to forgive, not completely, but standing there in the quiet night, I realized I no longer felt the burning anger that had fueled me through the past months. In its place was a weary acceptance. What Daniel had done was wrong, unquestionably, but he was still my son, shaped by both my successes and failures as a parent. In those quiet moments of contemplation, I finally acknowledged the questions that had been haunting me since this ordeal began. Had I somehow contributed to Daniel's sense of entitlement? Had my financial support throughout his life taught him to see my resources as an extension of his own? Was there something I could have done differently as a mother that might have prevented this betrayal? I had no answers, only the certainty that dwelling on these questions served no purpose now. The past couldn't be changed. I could only decide how to move forward. When I finally returned inside, Emily was alone in the living room, nursing a glass of wine by the fire. Sophie went to call her boyfriend, she explained. Secret Christmas, sweet nothings, no doubt. I smiled and settled beside her on the sofa. She's growing up so fast. Too fast, Emily agreed. But she's becoming an amazing young woman. She hesitated, then added, she asked about Uncle Daniel today. Wanted to know if they'll ever be a family again. What did you tell her? That family is complicated, that people make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, and that forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. She looked at me uncertainly. Was that right? It was perfect, I assured her, and very wise. Emily sipped her wine thoughtfully. I saw Daniel yesterday. He seems different, humbled. Bankruptcy will do that, I said, deciding to share what Richard had told me. Emily's eyes widened. They filed for bankruptcy? He didn't mention that. Pride, I echoed Richard's assessment. It's a powerful force. What are you going to do about his letter? She asked. Will you respond? I considered the question carefully. Eventually, not with forgiveness, necessarily, but with acknowledgement. A conversation, as he suggested. When I'm ready. Emily nodded, understanding in her eyes. For what it's worth, I think that's the right approach. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire slowly die down to embers. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in a clean white blanket, nature's way of suggesting that even the most damaged landscapes can be renewed. The week after Christmas, I finally sat down to respond to Daniel's letter. I wrote and rewrote my thoughts several times before settling on a brief but honest reply. Daniel, I've received and read your letter. While I appreciate your acknowledgement of wrongdoing, the breach of trust between us cannot be quickly or easily repaired. What you and Victoria attempted to do would have stripped me of my autonomy and dignity, fundamental aspects of my personhood that I've worked my entire life to maintain. I understand that financial desperation can drive people to desperate actions. I'm glad to hear you're taking steps to address those underlying issues. Those changes will serve you well, regardless of what happens between us. I'm not ready for a face-to-face conversation. The wound is still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. Perhaps in time, that will change. For now, I need distance and space to heal in my own way. Take care of yourself. Mom. After mailing the letter, I felt a sense of closure. Not complete healing, but a cauterizing of the wound. I had acknowledged Daniel's apology without promising more than I could give. It was honest, and that honesty was the only foundation upon which any future relationship could possibly be built. As January arrived with its characteristic New England chill, I found myself focusing increasingly on the future rather than the past. The civil settlement had provided additional financial security, and Richard had helped me establish ironclad protections for my assets moving forward. No one, not even Emily, could access my accounts without multiple verifications and safeguards. I renewed my involvement with the community center, accepting a position on their education committee where my experience could be put to good use. I joined a book club that met weekly at the local library, finding intellectual stimulation and budding friendships among its members. I even signed up for a watercolor painting class, something I'd always wanted to try but never found time for during my working years. In late January, I received a brief note from Daniel acknowledging my letter and respecting my need for distance. He included his personal email address, if you ever want to reach out, but made no demands or expectations. It was, perhaps, the most mature communication I'd received from him in years. One evening, as winter's grip began to loosen its hold on New Hampshire, I sat at my desk working on a new project, a memoir of my years in education. The idea had come from Emily, who suggested that my experiences might inspire others in the field. As I wrote about the challenges and triumphs of my career, I found myself reflecting on the resilience I'd developed through decades of facing obstacles and overcoming them. That same resilience had carried me through Daniel's betrayal, helping me fight for my rights and reclaim my independence when they were threatened. It wasn't just stubbornness or pride, though both played their part, but a deep-seated belief in my own worth and capabilities that had sustained me. Looking back over the tumultuous months since that autumn day when I'd overheard my son's treachery, I realized I'd emerged not just intact, but stronger. I had discovered reserves of courage I hadn't known I possessed. I had reinforced bonds with those who truly supported me, and I had learned once again that age was no barrier to standing up for oneself. The future remained uncertain in many ways. I didn't know if Daniel and I would ever fully reconcile, or what that reconciliation might look like. I couldn't predict how my relationships with Emily and Sophie might evolve as they navigated their own paths through life. I couldn't even be sure how many more years I'd have to enjoy my hard-won independence. But of one thing I was absolutely certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them on my own terms, with clarity of purpose and strength of will. I had earned that right through decades of hard work and responsible choices. And no one, not even my own child, would ever take it from me again. Have you ever stood at a crossroads where one path leads to peace through forgiveness and the other to protection through firm boundaries? It's the hardest choice we face as we age, deciding which relationships to repair and which to release. What would you do if the person who betrayed you most deeply was someone you once carried in your own body, someone whose entire existence began with your love? That night, I added a final entry to the journal I'd been keeping since this ordeal began. A letter not to Daniel, but to myself. Dear Margaret, remember this moment. Remember how it felt to discover your own strength when it was most needed. Remember the people who stood beside you when it mattered most. And remember that your worth has never been defined by others' perceptions or expectations, but by your own integrity, intelligence, and courage. Your life remains your own. Live it fully, wisely, and without regret, with respect and determination. Margaret. I closed the journal and placed it in my desk drawer, a testament to battles fought and won. Outside my window, the first tentative buds of spring were appearing on the maple tree, nature's perennial promise of renewal after even the harshest winter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities. And I would meet them all as I always had, with my head held high, my mind clear and focused, and my spirit unbroken. After all, I wasn't just Margaret Ellison, former principal, mother, grandmother. I was Iron Margaret. And iron doesn't break, it endures. If you've ever faced family betrayal like mine, share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to follow the next chapter of my journey of resilience and strength.